Hey everybody, welcome to Camel City Chat. I am your host, John McPherson, and I am very fortunate to be here with a friend of mine, Gene Hoots. Gene is probably well known around the area, but we're gonna talk more about that. But I think we've known each other since we're thinking now 1978.
Right, 43 years.
Yeah, so we'll have to talk about that when we get there. But of course, I have to ask you the first question, and that is, where are you from? And how long have you been here? I know Winston-Salem is now not your official home, and you go back and forth for some different places because you've retired, but tell us about how long you've been in Winston-Salem and how you got here.
I was born here in Baptist Hospital in 1939 and lived most of my life in the area until 25 years ago when I moved to Charlotte because I had two baby granddaughters down there and decided to be near them. But most of my life has been spent right here within 15 miles of where we're sitting now.
Right, and so we're here actually at Renolda Gardens and Renolda Village, and actually we're the exact opposite end of where we sat when I interviewed Bo Gray, the fourth. I will add a little bit to that because I know you because I've been to your house. So you lived in the Clemens area off of Hampton Road, but literally your family's farm is kind of now, if you're at the Food Lion on 158, that area there, if you go across and go behind those apartments, that was really your family farm, wasn't it?
Yeah, my grandfather owned 4 different farms in Davie County, and they were all in the Advanced Farmington area. And you're referring to one of those there in that area. Yeah.
And so, that's how I knew you from there, and then, of course, we'll get into some other stuff. So we've got that. So you've lived here all your life, but then, of course, you're in Charlotte. Now, you're wearing something from Montana, so we're going to have to talk about that at some point. So the second question is, and I'm assuming that you're going to probably say rolling out of your backyard over there and into Staley's, but it's not there anymore. So what's your favorite place to eat in Winston?
My favorite place,
I know.
It goes back to 1977. It's got to be Ryan's over on Coliseum.
Mr. Dennis.
Dennis Carter and Jeff have run that place for all these years, and both my children work there. They were your contemporaries. But my daughter Holly started there as hostess when she was 15.
Yeah, no, I remember. I remember seeing Holly working there, and of course Charles worked there. But Dennis is very good friends with my broker in charge, John Mooney, and they fly fish together. But what a classic restaurant. In fact, I was talking to my brother Ted the other night, and we usually give him a gift card for Ryan's for Christmas, and he's like, I used it, just wanted to let you know. But a great meal, great steak.
Yep.
And a good place to eat.
Yeah, it's been a favorite of mine ever since they opened.
So when you're in Winston, obviously either COVID time or pre-COVID time, what are some things that you really like to do that maybe hidden gems that you learned over your years here?
I don't know that there's anything hidden, but my favorite thing really is to come right here to Renolda Village. I lived up the street. You mentioned I lived right beside what was Staley's at that time, for Telly's now, and my office was here in Renolda Village when we started our company. So this is one of my favorite places. And when I come back, I like to bring people to see Old Salem, to see Renolda Village, Renolda House, Grayland.
Right.
All those things are things that I enjoy still, and lots of folks that aren't familiar with the town love to come and see them with me.
Well, I always remember that you, when you'd come back to town, because did you ever move to Atlanta for the company, or you always went to Charlotte? So you went to Atlanta for a while.
I had an apartment in Buckhead for about 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Never full time.
We'll get to what that's about. But no, I mean, when you would come back into town, or when the guys would come into town on your team, I always remembered that they would stay at downtown at the. Didn't you love to stay at the Salem?
Oh, at the Brookstown, not with the Brookstown Inn, but there was.
Salem Inn,
it was the Zevely Inn.
The Zevely Inn,
right across from the tavern.
Yeah, you always would tell me that's just a great
there.
place to stay,
like to stay
and I'd love to get by there sometime.
Yeah. Don't do that a lot anymore. But I guess it's still there.
Yeah, it is. It is now. The Salem Tavern's closed.
Yeah.
The tea place that was behind underneath the gift shop has now been moved over to the Schaffner House, and they just recently closed, and they're relocating, so everyone's trying to figure out where they're going to be
changes.
going. Yeah. So, but all right. So let's go back in time here then and talk about some stuff. So, I guess my first question to you is, what's it like to coach a no-talented individual that you had to play a certain amount of periods in a basketball game of Clemens Cougars?
Who are you referring to here,
I know
John?
exactly who I'm referring to. The only thing I could do is rebound. So.
Well, I wasn't much of a coach.
You were fine.
Truth, but that
my favorite
that was our first experience together, I guess.
Yeah.
John was on the team.
I jumped up one time and my mom always laughs about this. Is Gene looks at me and goes, "Get on the bench now. I don't want another technical or something for that." It's just like that. But so you have, let's talk about your family. You have a lovely daughter, married with a couple of kids.
Yes.
And they're down in the Charlotte area.
Well, my daughter and son-in-law are in the Charlotte area.
Right.
I don't know how much longer they're going to be there.
Because the kids are in college and moved.
Actually, they've out of college a couple of years, and they went west and
Right.
followed some of my adventures in the West.
Okay.
And one of them lives in Tucson, and the other one lives in Portland, in Oregon.
Okay. All right. Cool. Holly was just an awesome person. I can pick up the phone right now and pick right up where I last talked to her. Probably, just a great lady. And then there's Charles. No, and then Charles, who you guys have to realize this. I'm friends with Charles. I remember we had a Spanish exchange student that came to McGinnis when we were in school, and Charles decided he was going to learn Spanish that summer so he could talk to her. If you remember that, he just taught himself Spanish. And then Charles went overseas and just did crazy things. And you miss Charles, and he's married. He lives in Paris. I went and visited him in 1999 and saw him in his apartment, and saw Khadijah, who they're not together, but you still remain friends with.
Very close to Khadijah. I see her a lot.
As I tell people, I said I was at the marketing director of the Yemenis embassy's home, and I was there as their guest because of my friend, and I still don't know who was at the table, and it's probably best that I don't. But just entertaining with my friends.
I will mention, John, sadly enough, those two guys were two of the three most prominent.
So you know who I was with?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then all right.
Both.
I don't know who they were.
I won't give you their names because they don't make any difference.
But
and they're Arabic, but they were two of the top three people in the Yemeni government at that time. And sadly, in the intervening years, in separate auto accidents, they were both killed in car wrecks back in Yemen. So we lost them both within a few years. Broke my heart because they were great guys.
Yeah, and just nice men. We were sitting there talking and just learning about everybody's culture. And they had this apartment, and honestly, their patio's about this brick thing here. You could maybe not even the bottom one, the top one, and you just lean out and you could look one way and see the Eiffel Tower, and the other way and see the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
I did say Statue of Liberty. So we great to see him. Obviously, things didn't work out with them, and I'll touch on her long enough to say that what a wonderful, powerful, empowering lady who has taught us so much about her culture and fighting norms of her culture, because she had a very, very rough upbringing with her. They wanted to marry her off very young, and she
10 or 11.
Yeah, and she actually did a documentary on another young lady and talking about that, and so interesting stuff with her.
Right.
And probably we'll put a link in maybe to her documentary so people can learn more about her and what she's doing, because the sex slave industry here, and where they're abducting people and all that stuff. She is very involved in fighting for women
rights.
and their rights.
True.
Internationally.
Yeah.
All right. So then Charles gets another wild hair, and he decides he wants to be a vet.
That's right.
But of course, he can't go to any school. He has to go to Cornell.
Well, I didn't think he was going to get in anywhere, actually. He had to come back to do 2 years of undergraduate work at East Carolina to get the prerequisites to get into vet school. And finally, he was accepted at Cornell, where he met his second wife,
who is a phenomenal,
lovely lady. And she's a veterinarian too.
Make a great pair. They live in the Sarasota area.
Yes.
We had a timeshare down there, and so I'm like, Charles, you want to get together? And met him for breakfast. And of course, Charles has a small side to him which can be irritating if you're not in on his jokes, i.e. he likes to pick on people. So he always is picking on me. I can tell you some of the stupid things he's done to me over the years. But so it's great to catch up with him. I got to spend almost 2 or 3 hours with him, and just a wonderful kid. You have to look on what you and Judy created with 2 children, and how you've got to be proud.
Well, we are. I'm proud, and I know their mother would be. It was funny. She didn't live to see him go to Cornell. We joked about it. She always said he was Ivy League material.
Right.
But he had to wait till he was 35 to get in, or thereabouts. So.
I finally made it to Cornell for a fraternity reunion.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that was it. I was there long enough to say, hey, that's where our national fraternity. Other than that, that's about all the teaching I could get from there.
And he still does international work.
Yep.
He's out on his own doing international consulting, the work that he does takes him to different countries. He's been to Ethiopia, to Egypt, I guess Ethiopia. He's certainly been to, Georgia, not the other Georgia in the east, West African countries, and Egypt.
And he's always done that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there's stories we could tell. The thing though that you know afforded all of this was you had a great job at R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company.
Well,
and so how
was
did you
a
get to
part.
Reynolds?
Well, that was kind of by chance. I'd gone to school at NC State
Right.
and got a mechanical engineering degree. Decided that I really wasn't cut out to be an engineer.
Right.
And so I went to UNC. In those days, you could go right to grad school,
Right.
an MBA program. It's very hard to do now.
Right.
They don't let you come in just right out of undergrad, but I did. Finished, and I went to work for DuPont for a couple of years.
Right.
And Judy was up there, and we lived there a while, but my roots were deep right here in North Carolina, and I
Right,
really
yeah.
wanted to come back. And what happened was I had never had any thought of working for R.J. Reynolds, but to get back here, that was a logical choice.
Right.
And I discovered that there were a couple of guys who were ex-DuPonters
Right.
who had come to work for Reynolds. And
Okay.
when I was down here, I had lunch with them one day, and shortly thereafter, they called and said they had an opening, that if I was interested in working in the Archer division, which was
Okay.
packaging and aluminum,
Correct. Yep.
they'd consider me. So I got hired for that job, and that's how I got back to Reynolds. And I was there 21 years after
Right.
that.
And so we're going to take a quick break. I want to show a little bit about you. We'll put up the website for the book.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to the Reynolds topic.
All right.
All right.
Fine.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Gene Hoots, who I met his son probably in grade school at probably. And we were talking about that, I guess, at Clemens Elementary because
Yeah.
we were both born the same year. Charles is what? He's
I have to add up. He's
April or
50
May?
His birthday?
Yeah.
March the 6th.
Okay, so that's it.
So
So
it's coming up.
I just had mine March 1st, so his
Yeah,
birthday's this
his
week.
birthday's
So
this week.
yeah, so we're both 53, but you know, that's how I met you, was through either Clemens Cougars or through, you know, sleepovers and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, you know, and then our parents became friends, which is
Sure.
I never knew that till I had a kid. That's what you really do, is you become friends with
That's
your kids'
exactly
friends.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
parents. So you're at RJR, and I always heard that you had an interesting job there. So maybe I'm wrong, but did you have something to do with either taxes or profit sharing at Reynolds? How did
that's
we
what
get to
I
there?
did. Yeah, well, I worked there in Archer for 5 years.
Right.
And then I switched over to the parent company, and I worked in mergers and acquisitions. But all the work that I did was finances of one kind or another. It was moving numbers around. That was my whole career. I never was in operations and never was in sales. But after 10 years there, I worked for 14 months in New York.
Right.
We were making an acquisition of this big oil company in Texas, and I got assigned to New York to work on that.
Right.
And I did, and as a lesson here, that was one of the biggest disappointments of my life. When the acquisition was completed, I had hoped that they would give me a job in Texas and I could go there and be in the oil business.
Right.
And it turned out they were
You were too
overstaffed.
good at it.
No, I was
Yeah.
overstaffed.
Okay.
They were overstaffed at the operation down there with the merger. So things didn't work out, and I had to come back to Winston-Salem.
Right.
Well, as it turned out, that was 86. And that was 76. By 1980, the oil business had collapsed.
Right.
If I had taken that job, I'd have been walking the street in Houston with
Right.
no job and no real credentials to be in the oil business. So
Right.
meantime, I came back to Reynolds, and the treasurer offered me the job running the pension fund at
Okay.
RJR, which was a very small fund at the time, and I expected that job to last a year. I was interested in investments, but I figured it would last a year and I'd move on to something else. The company would transfer me elsewhere. Well, it turned out that there couldn't have been a better job and a better industry in America, because this was the time when pension funds were growing in size, a lot of mergers leading pension funds to be put together, and it was just a big time in the investment industry. And I lucked out by being in probably one of the greatest growth industries of the latter part of the 20th century, just by chance.
So I want to make sure everyone hears that. You managed R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company's pension
Yeah,
fund.
that was my job.
When you left, it had a little more value than when you started.
Well,
correct?
but not because of my efforts. Yeah.
But still, you're
Well, I'll mention that. Yeah, it was a not a very big job. Reynolds only had $200 million in their pension fund, which is peanuts in the world of pensions.
I mean, I'll take a little bit of it.
Of course.
But now.
Well, what happened was the law, ERISA, was passed, and companies could no longer leave their funds underfunded. So Reynolds started putting in about $100 million a year into the fund to get it up to speed.
Right.
And they were making acquisitions and putting all those together. Then the company started a 401k plan, and when you put it all together, when I left, it was $4 billion. It was.
And you were the manager of that
I was the manager of the $4 billion. But that again, that placed me just at about the level of number 100 in America.
Right.
We were only the 100th biggest, believe it or not.
So after that, you kind of learned something at Reynolds. Your next gig, I guess, would be that you decided, hey, I'm going to start a mutual fund.
Well, that didn't happen quite that simply, and there was a lot of bumps in the road in between. One of those major bumps was Ross Johnson, of course.
Right. Correct.
Maybe we'll talk about that later, but
we can. Yeah, we'll get to that when we get to the book.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's how. But we started in. I left the company about the time Ross took over, and then the fellow Tom Quinn, who became my partner, had worked with me at Reynolds, and he had moved to Atlanta with the company when they moved down there. And when it all came apart, we started our own company, and it was called Cornerstone at first, and then Corner Cap Investments.
So Cornerstone Capital, located here.
Right here.
You had an office here. You had an office in Atlanta.
Right behind the Renault, right behind the Village Tavern.
Okay.
Was where we were first.
Right behind the Village Tavern.
That was our first office.
Okay, and so it was you and how many people here? And
we ended up, the most we ever had was 3 of us here.
Right.
Yeah, 3. But the office in Atlanta, it being a bigger city, it grew a lot bigger. We ended with something like 3 of us in Charlotte, and there were 20 people in Atlanta. That was the headquarters.
So, and you just retired when?
January the 1st.
So January the 1st. So you've left your baby. Tom is still one of the owners with a couple other people.
Yeah.
He's the majority owner. So the 2 of you that became 3 of you started in Reynolda is now how many people?
Oh, there are about 22 people in all. 20 to 22.
Right, yeah. And so tell me a little bit about Corner Cap, because...
Well, we started the business, and we were very lucky. Most people start with some seed money. There's a fund, somebody wants to hire them. We did not have that. We didn't get to take any of the R.J. Reynolds money with us, so we had to start from scratch. We had this tiny little fund that your family had invested their profit-sharing money in, and I think the whole thing was maybe $5 million.
Right.
And we had to start growing it from that, and we have grown it. It was slow but steady progress, and we grew it to where we've had about $1.2 billion in it now after 30 years. It's still modest, but a reasonably sized operation and a good company.
Yeah.
And we had an opportunity, though. The same thing that caused us to create the company in the first place also provided us a leg up, which I didn't appreciate until recently. But what happened was Reynolds was bought out in 88 and 89. Right. And when that buyout came, there were a lot of people in Winston-Salem who owned a lot of stock, as we know, and they ended up any number of millionaires here in the city. Right. Plus, a lot of the executives got golden parachutes or aged out and retired. Right. And those people knew of our investment background, and so we had a leg up in getting some of that money for our company. A lot of those people came to us. It was fortunate in that we had a name and that was recognizable here in the city.
Well, when you're managing $4 billion, you probably can manage my $10.
Well, that's what people thought.
Right,
I think we proved it. That we probably could, but that helped.
I would say that my experiences with you guys are you're definitely more of a buy and hold, but you guys move stuff around. But when I say that, the mentality is you're really not aggressive until it's needed. Yeah. And I've always appreciated that. I may have a friend of mine that has invested in the market, and they made a great amount, and I may not have made that. But when they're down, I'm usually not down as far, or I'm even up. Yeah. So I think your guys' matrix or whatever your formula is has been one of a very conservative yet growth mentality.
Yeah, we want to be slow and steady. I heard a comment just this week. Somebody said there's nothing that makes somebody angrier than watching their next door neighbor get rich in the market and they aren't making any money.
Correct.
And
yeah.
that happens from time to time.
And so with life, and I mean, your dad, and not to bring up a sad thing, but your dad, how long ago did he pass away?
Dad died 15 years ago. Yeah.
At his farm.
At his home.
Right.
At,
At his farm.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
years.
so you grew up on a farm. You know livestock.
Yeah.
Your son. The one thing we didn't say about Charles is your son is very skilled in large animals. But what's up with a skinny cow? So we got to talk about this. So I want to hear more about the skinny cow.
The book.
Yeah.
This was a book that I wrote 6 or 7 years ago, and it's really a collection of essays. It's not so much something I wrote. Some of it I wrote. Some of it I've collected from other people, but it reflects on a lot of things. About the philosophy of living, the philosophy of investing. I talk a little bit about the health care and the retirement system in America in the book, just things that I thought were topical. Health care, I dwelled on at length because Judy, my wife, had gone through a 5-year illness with cancer, which finally she was not able to overcome.
Right.
And dealing with the health care system was something I felt needed to be written about a little bit.
We're learning more about that
yeah,
now. Catherine has really stepped in with my dad,
Yeah.
and it seems that you got to scream to get attention.
Yes, you do.
Yeah,
it's a shame, but that's just the way it is.
Right,
You
but I
just
mean,
gotta watch.
and I've gotten lucky. He's applied a couple times through some other people. I've got a client now that is saying the last thing she does before she moves out of town is going to get him VA approved on his hearing aids. I mean, he was a gunner in World War II.
Sure.
Where do you think he lost his hearing?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you are correct. I mean, healthcare needs everything we can.
That was the book. The name was a bit of a surprise. I didn't come up with a name for the book.
Right.
I have a friend in Charlotte, and she had a friend who was in the advertising business.
Right.
And I had the manuscript ready to go to print, and I didn't have a name for the book. And he said, let me look at the book. So he took it home one night, and I couldn't believe this. He called me the next morning, and he said, I've got 3 choices for you.
Right.
3 names. And when I saw that one, the name was Pay Attention to the Thin Cow.
Why do we pay attention to the thin cow?
It was just perfect for the theme of the book because it had to do with investing, but it was from something I had related in the book about my uncle Kenneth, who was a farmer. Kenneth Hoots is known still over in Davie County as a great farmer over there, and he raised cattle. And he always said, when I go to the sale, I buy the thin cows. I don't want fat cows because you can't do anything to improve them.
Right.
You need to buy the ones that look sickly and nobody else thinks they can do anything with them.
Because you're going to get a
You
deal
got a
on
bargain.
them.
You always got
You
a
put the
deal.
money in to get them healthy, and then
you sell them.
And you
that's
sell them,
what
right?
he did. So that captured the whole book. And the guy that was in advertising said, that's the name for your book. And he actually drew the cover of the book.
Right.
He was an artist as well. So he gave me the title, and he sketched out the cover for the book with a picture of the farmer with his hugging his cow on the cover of the book.
Perfect.
So that was the story on that book.
Well, we'll show a picture of that book, or I guess a link on Amazon. Can people get on Amazon?
They can't get that on Amazon, but if they go to Corner Cap's website,
All right, we'll send them to Corner Cap's website.
Corner Cap's website, there are no hard copies available, but they can download a copy of it free if they'll sign up with Corner Cap and give them their email address.
Okay, perfect. We'll do that then. So we'll
it's
take a
still
quick break,
available.
and then when we come back, it's time to talk about Reynolds.
Okay.
All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, and we're switching seats because I had the comfy seat, and I'm giving it to my guests now. So I'll take the rocky one.
John.
Yeah, I got more.
You got more padding.
I got more padding.
I noticed that.
Yeah. I'm not real proud of this. It's really weird, Gene. Right before the pandemic, I was at really good weight, but just work and everything is crazy. And
I understand.
So I want to ask you this, and I guess it's a simple question. We'll take probably the rest of the show because of the fact that it's, but. You worked at Reynolds, and then a few years ago you decide, I've read what's out there. I want to put my 2 cents in.
Yeah.
So you write a book, Tobacco Road. The full title is
Going Down Tobacco Road.
Right. Yeah, and it's a great story about a whole bunch of people. I mean, you go on your website, you can click and find out about different individuals and stuff like that. So tell us. Why'd you write the book, and then start to share some of the stories and that you think will help us get you some more people interested in the book and
Sure.
maybe sell some
Well,
copies.
there are two reasons for writing the book. There were two messages I wanted to get out. One of them was that when the buyout took place, that was the seminal event in the history of Winston-Salem. In many ways, Winston-Salem and certainly RJR, the buyout of RJR, that was really a big turning point for the city. And that event was covered in Barbarians at the Gate by the two guys at the Wall Street Journal. They wrote a great book on that.
And this is H. Ross and KKR and all that stuff?
That's correct. This all happened in the fall of 88, spring of 89.
And so James Garner was in, I forget who played the other, right? But I mean,
James Garner played Ross Johnson.
And the two planes flying side by side on the phone was really happened.
A lot of that, no.
I think it really happened.
A lot of that stuff I've forgotten for the movie, but they hokied the movie up quite a bit to make it work. But that happened, and it was covered very well in that book. John Hillier and Brian Burra did a marvelous job, but they only covered about 6 weeks in the life of the company because that was the event. That was the bulk of what the book was about. There was some history there, but I realized that there was a much longer story. And my thought was, what led up to that event?
Right.
It didn't happen overnight. That was a cataclysmic event, but what caused it? And I realized that the seeds of that problem went back years and years. So I wanted to write about that. And then there was a question, what happened after the company was bought? It kind of went away and disappeared, and Reynolds Tobacco stayed here in Winston-Salem, but it was never the same.
Right.
And what happened to those companies years later? And there was a fantastic story about them too.
Right.
So we had that, and as I got into it, I realized that a lot of people were not going to understand anything about this because I didn't have any background on what was tobacco like, what did it mean. So I had to go back and create a history of tobacco in North Carolina, stressing the importance of what that gold leaf has meant to this state, not only Winston-Salem, but Durham, pretty much the whole state.
Well, yeah,
of North
Durham's
Carolina.
Duke, and then you got, Greensboro was Brown and Williamson.
Sure.
Now,
And Lorillard.
Is it true that the Haynes sold their tobacco company to the Reynolds
That
to
is
start
correct.
RJR?
Yeah.
And they used the money from that purchase
To start the
the
textile
textile
business.
company?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And similarly, James Duke, Buck Duke,
Right.
took his tobacco money and started Duke Power. They
Right.
tell me he made more money in electric power than he made in tobacco.
Right.
I don't know about that. But
Okay.
it easily could have been the case.
All
But
right.
A lot of wealth came out of the tobacco business.
All right.
It left that. The other thing that prompted me to really sit down and start writing was a report that came from the London School of Economics in 2015. There were 3 researchers there who studied the most profitable businesses. What were the most profitable industries you could invest in both Europe, in the UK, and in America from 1900 to 2015? And not surprisingly, I guess, in Great Britain it turned out to be the liquor business.
Right.
Here it was tobacco.
Okay.
And there was nothing that even came close. As I point out in the book, tobacco, unbelievably, if you invested $1 in tobacco stocks on January the 1st, 1900, at the end of 2015, it would have been $6.2 million. It compounded at 14.5% a year for 115 years. And that was pretty consistent with my experience and continuing experience in tobacco. So there were factors that made this just an unbelievably profitable industry. And I covered those in the book too.
So how far back do you go?
I really start the company briefly with R.J. Reynolds starting it, and I cover the history fairly quickly up to 1960.
Okay.
But then in 1960 is when the diversification started.
Okay.
And that's when we began to add all these businesses to the tobacco business, and what I contend is the downfall of the company.
All right, so adding Nabisco was not a good thing.
Well, it certainly didn't turn out to be.
Right.
Adding Ross Johnson definitely wasn't a good
Right.
thing for the company, as
Correct.
it turned out.
All right. So when so we're in the 60s, and you know, basically we've got our major brands of Camel, Winston, Salem, et
Right.
cetera, and then you know, you're talking about what was our first what was Reynolds' first acquisition that started this chain reaction?
Well, the first acquisition, which turned out to be a fairly favorable one, went back pre-60, and that was the Archer Aluminum Division.
Right.
Now that was an integration backward to get the supply of materials. That worked out very well, and Archer was never a major acquisition, but it was a fine small acquisition, a bolt-on to the company, and it was well conducted, well run, and did well.
And what did Archer do?
It made the packages for all the cigarettes
Right, so,
and other aluminum products as well.
And so in growing up, I was at someone's house that invented that that candy wrapper that went on the Salems probably in the 90s or something like that. That was an aluminum type of.
That came after I was there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd met he lived out in Shamrock Estates, and he was responsible for that particular thing. So when you unwrap like a candy bar or whatever, this material was part of the Reynolds family.
Yeah, that could have been. Yeah, and Reynolds made packaging materials for outside customers too. A lot of food companies, their packages came from RJR. Reynolds was called a packaging converter, and that's what it did. RJR and Archer did that, but that made sense. But then we began to move far afield. We started buying food companies, and the theme that they intended to have work was that cigarettes and food were both sold retail. It kind of made sense to put them together. It turned out there was no commonality there at all.
Well, you're the C store, and you got the grab and goes when you're getting your packs.
But basically, the two do not belong in the same business. The cultures are just completely different. But we bought food companies, then we ended up buying the shipping company. That was a really big mistake because we knew nothing about shipping.
Oil?
And then we bought 2 oil companies. We owned those. And then we ended up buying Del Monte. Then we bought Hubline, which had Smirnoff vodka and Kentucky Fried Chicken and a lot of things along the way. Then we finally added Nabisco.
Not that I would know this, but of course Hubline created Brass Monkey, and I did not partake in that when I was in college. Yes.
I didn't know that.
Beastie Boys song, premix. Have no idea what I'm talking about.
But you sounds familiar.
Yeah, so what do you think the first company was then that really concerned you the most in doing your research?
Well, the first food company they bought was Pacific Hawaiian, and that worked out fairly well with, that would be the Hawaiian Punch product line. That was fairly profitable. But we then started to buy little regional brands. We bought a brand of potato chips down in Atlanta, and there was no way to take it nationally, make it a national brand. And that's what we wanted to do, but we just weren't able to do it. So we had a number of those. Chunking Chinese foods.
I remember that,
we grossly overpaid for that company.
Right.
We probably paid 2.5 times what that company was worth.
Right.
And this was when you read the book, I've got the numbers there, you can see we consistently overpaid for what we bought.
Right.
And I even, in working on the book, I actually had dinner in New York just before the pandemic with the treasurer of Nabisco, who came here and worked for RJR for a while and was my boss briefly at Reynolds. And he was laughing. We were both laughing about it. And he said he was on the selling side. And he said, essentially, we knew you were overpaying. I knew you were overpaying for us when you bought us.
Yeah, right.
What are we going to do? Turn the money down?
Right. Yep.
So that was one of the experiences that we had. And then with that, Ty Wilson was on the right track. He was the CEO at that point.
Right.
He had begun to realize that we needed to forge ahead with the initial plan that was set up to be a consumer goods company.
Right.
So he spun off the shipping company. He sold off the oil companies. He got rid of those. And he sold Kentucky Fried Chicken.
That went to Yum Brands.
Yeah, it went to Yum Brands. And that was a PepsiCo deal.
Right.
And then he pulled this really great deal in coming up with Nabisco, which of course had an array of brands that was unbelievable. I think 9 out of the top 10 selling cookies and crackers in America were Nabisco
Planters.
brands.
Is Planters part of that
Planters
too?
was folded
part of
into
Nabisco?
that.
Yeah, okay.
That was a part of it. I'm not sure how that came in. We got Planters Lifesavers. They may have come in separately, but I think they were part of Nabisco. But in the end, we had this thing, and then Ty had embarked on this project to make a smokeless cigarette.
Right.
And that sadly was his undoing because
Eclipse.
it was, I don't know that it had a, was that the name?
That was
They didn't actually come up with
that
a
was
name
the carton with the
Yeah.
white on it all wrapped in white, Eclipse.
I was gawed by that time.
Well, we were selling at that point
you
with
would have
KNS
been-
News, so
sure.
that was,
Well, the product had its challenges, but the thing was, he really needed to keep it secret.
Right.
But the mistake politically was that he didn't tell the board about what he was doing.
Right.
And they greatly resented it. Ross, being a consummate politician,
Right.
knew how to play this game, and
Right.
he turned that bit of ill will at the board level against Ty, and Ty had to leave, and Ross took over.
Well, it's like they say in county government, when I was on town council in Louisville, it takes a majority to hire the town manager, but it only takes one to fire him because everyone gets sick of hearing their voice and says, let's just move on to the next person.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what happened here.
Let's show your website to everybody, and then we'll
Okay.
come back and finish up talking about that. All right? We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. John McPherson here with Camel City Chat, and I'm here with my guest, Gene Hoots, who is a friend of mine for how many years did you say?
We say 43 years.
Well, you can do math, so remember, I don't do
43
math. So 43 years. So Gene, we were talking about, obviously, you can watch the movie, you can read, as you said, a great book, Barbarians at the Gate. That's a 6-week, just snapshot of it. What else happened that, someone may not know? Or
Well, the major thing was what happened afterwards.
That'd be great to hear
And
about.
I compared Reynolds to the Roman Empire through the
Okay.
book. I used that parallel.
All right.
Reynolds started out small. It built an empire, reached its peak in about 1960, and then began to spread out like the Roman Empire did and into other parts of Europe where there were barbarians, and actually invited those barbarians in eventually.
The Barbarians at the Gate.
Yeah, they invited them in, and then Reynolds was taken over by the barbarians. It crashed, and then went through a period I call the Dark Ages.
Right.
And that was about 10 years when KKR owned the company. And the problem was that KKR had borrowed way too much money to finance the company.
Right.
They had started out with almost $30 billion of debt. Interest, unbelievably, ran about $10 million a day.
Right.
And there was just not enough money generated to pay that down. So they had to sell off assets, and they never could make the thing viable economically. So the three major companies that were there floundered around in what I call the Dark Ages for 10 years. And then a guy named Steve Goldstone, who was with the law firm Davis Polk Wardwell, who was Reynolds' attorneys, he came in as the CEO. Seemed a strange choice for an attorney to run a cigarette company.
Right.
But he was the perfect guy for the time. I never got to meet him, but he did a great job.
Right.
He brought the tobacco industry, the tobacco companies, to the realization that they had to strike a deal, which was the Master Settlement Agreement, and settle these lawsuits. He got that done, and then he split the three companies apart. He sold Nabisco to Philip Morris Craft Division.
Right.
And it's done very well since, I think, over that period of time.
Right.
Reynolds here in town became Reynolds American. It rolled right along and made fabulous profits for the people that bought the new stock at R.J. Reynolds, even better in many ways than the original stockholders in Reynolds did over that period of time. Then it was bought by its parent, British American, just in the last couple of 3 years.
Who also then came and bought Lorillard.
Well, we meaning Reynolds, put that together. Lorillard, Brown and Williamson, and Reynolds became one major competitor, the other one being only Philip Morris. So now you had two major cigarette companies. The three of them together were a viable competitor. If they had not combined, Philip Morris would have picked them off one by one.
Now, did Commonwealth spin off of that, or Commonwealth went into that and then?
I don't know that name.
Yeah, okay, because I have friends that have worked in that, and of course, we used to sell a Santa Fe, the natural cigarette that Reynolds bought. And, I have a client that is, they call her queen of the vape, so she works in the vape division.
All right.
So they have so right now we have British, BAT owns here. And then what else does BAT own?
Well, worldwide, they're huge. They and Philip Morris are, I guess, probably the dominant tobacco companies worldwide.
Okay.
They're British American, started in London, of course.
Right.
And they've been powerhouse all over the world. And now they've become a real strong competitor here, much more so than they were with just British American or Brown and Williamson. But the amazing story was not only what happened to Reynolds domestic, but the international business. Reynolds, from day one, the guys that ran Reynolds were from right here. They liked being here. They didn't feel comfortable or didn't want to go abroad, and Philip Morris did. So Philip Morris seized the international market from RJR early on. And so the company Reynolds started way behind the 8 ball on that. But once Goldstone split up the company in '99, he sold off all the international operations to Japan Tobacco.
Right.
And what was Reynolds International then became Japan Tobacco International. Most people don't know that story, but I got to know a lot of those people there, and many of them became my clients in investments.
Right.
And then when I say there, I'm talking about Geneva. They were
Right.
headquartered in Geneva. I made a lot of trips to Geneva. I was there 3 or 4 times a year for years. And they took that company, and the Japanese gave them the capital, they gave them the support in marketing.
They nurtured it. Yeah.
They did, and they took that thing to the moon. It
Right.
started out making about $400 million was its pre-tax profit when the Japanese bought it. They paid, what was it? They paid, I think they paid $8 billion for it. They paid 40 times earnings
Right.
for it, or thereabouts. It was just.
Now, did they have agreements for the brands? Were
Yeah,
they okay?
yeah,
so they were
they
able to
bought all-
manufacture Camel.
Yeah, they were.
over there.
They had all the brands. They
Right.
got all the rights to all those brands
Right.
everywhere, but in the United States.
Right.
So they had all that, but they never had the capital or the marketing muscle to do anything with it. Now they did.
Right.
And they took that thing from 400 million in profit in 1999. In 2017, the profit adjusted for currency conversions was probably around 7 billion. They took it. They took it up. What would that be? I can't do the math, but it was 15 times the profit.
I mean, I might like take I might take 1% of that. I mean, I'm
Well,
okay with that.
they did a great job, and that's generally unknown here because none of it happened in America.
And a lot of people don't realize that you sell your brand to another company to
Yeah.
produce overseas, so
Yeah.
that you get that exposure.
Yeah, there was a lot of funny things that happened there. I learned that Winston cigarette, we had the right. R.J. Reynolds had the right to Winston everywhere but in the United Kingdom.
Right.
Maybe it had something to do with Winston
Winston
Churchill.
Churchill,
We
right,
were never
yeah.
sure, but
Right.
we could not sell Winston cigarettes.
I would
in
have
the Great
assumed
Britain
that,
at that
right?
time.
Yeah.
That was funny. Later it was okay, but that
Right.
was early on. That was one of those quirks.
And you know, it's so interesting to me being a rental. You know, I had Philip Morris reps, I had Brandon Williamson, Lowellard, et cetera. But I was obviously in Winston and supported R.J. Reynolds. It's interesting now to see what their brand makeup is, because it's like, no, that was your competitor. You can't be making those now.
Yeah.
So, but it's all worked out. And do you? What are your thoughts on the company now that you've written the book and everything? Are they moving in the right direction?
I don't know much about Reynolds specifically, but
Right.
I've talked to a group of people. There's been a whole group of folks that I've never had an opportunity to meet before, so I've made a lot of new friends
Right.
on email.
Right.
And they've read the book. Most of them are young security analysts
Okay.
who are still interested in investing in tobacco.
Right.
And they want to know what I think. Well, I don't know the first thing about where it's going.
Right.
But I did draw this conclusion. I said, look, the desire for nicotine has been around since about 1550.
Right.
It's not going away.
Right.
And I think it would be a mistake to bet that won't be sold in some form around the world for a long time. I'm not a supporter, and I was never an apologist for tobacco in the
Right.
book. I really would think people would be better off if they didn't use it, but they're going to use it. It's a product that's out there. It's a legal product, and I would expect there to be a market for it consistently for several more decades anyway.
I will tell you, as you know, we sold them, and my feeling was always, if there was a way that all my friends could keep their jobs and not do that, then I would be happy. But the one thing was that they always had the other side, the other industries with Nabisco and planters and things like that. Talking about coming back to Winston and what. As you drive around, I always tell the story about, there were two, we knocked newspapers off at what is it, the Reynolds Tower, we dropped newspapers off, and the other was at Rainbow News, and that was the only place that anybody went on downtown. What do you think of where Winston has come in the time that you've been coming back?
Well, I was very worried when I left here because Reynolds was gone, then Wells Fargo, Wachovia, lots and lots
Now
of
BB&T
businesses.
pulling up.
BB&T left, a couple of the trucking companies went broke. were sold out, and it looked like the city was going to really have a struggle. But I'm just think that a lot of good things have happened. When I come around now and see the city here, and particularly the renaissance that's taking place down behind the Reynolds building down there with the tech center.
Right.
I think this is all great stuff, and I'm very optimistic about the future. And I understand I haven't been here downtown at night, but I understand on 4th Street there are restaurants and cafes and bars open. In the evening and walking up and down the street.
And now we have pedestrian walkways over Salem Parkway, because you know it's not 421 anymore, it's Salem Parkway.
Okay.
Yeah,
and there's a
lit up.
big complex going in at 4th and Spruce Street there.
Yep.
A friend of mine, Clay Grubb, the real estate developer in Charlotte, is doing that.
Okay. He's
very active in a lot of North Carolina markets, and I think he'll be good for this city in that. Now, the ironic thing is that after all these years, if 4th Street is open and people are walking up and down, that's exactly like 4th Street was in 1945. I lived at 1st and Spruce in the Wachovia apartment, big brick building in the corner, still there.
1st and Spruce, okay. All right.
My dad worked night shift.
Okay.
And so my mother and I would walk up Spruce Street from 1st Street, 3 blocks up to 4th.
Right.
There were 2 movie theaters there, Forsyth, and then where the Stevens Center is now was the Carolina Theater.
Right.
We'd go to the movie.
Right.
And it was perfectly safe for a young mother and a 6-year-old kid to be walking up and down 4th Street. Stores were open. People were in there shopping.
Right.
So we've come full cycle in 75 years.
Well, you need to go back to, we need to get you in over at the Sir Winston Loft and the Indigo there, which was the old Pepper building.
Yeah, I know the building. I haven't been into any of that stuff.
We need to do a tour, man.
All right.
Yeah,
It's
so,
worth doing.
all right, so you got some, I think we got a couple minutes left. So you've got this Montana stuff on. What's going on with you in Montana?
Well, I've developed a love for Montana over the years.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, I always wanted, the truth is I always wanted to be a cowboy.
Right.
And after my wife died, I had a client, a young lady who we had known from here in Winston-Salem, but she lived in Charlotte. And she came to see me one day for a review. She was a client, and I'd known her here. And she said, Gene, I always wanted to go on a cattle drive.
Right.
And I said, you know, Grace, her name was Grace Kennedy. Her late father-in-law was my first boss at Reynolds. I said, Grace, you know, you're 45 years old. She said, I'm going to go when I'm 50. And I said, you're 45. I may not live till you're 50. So if we're going to go on a cattle drive, this better be this year.
Right.
So she goes on and finds a website. And a group of us go out there, and she's been back a time or so, brought her whole family later, but I've gone back almost every year. That was 2006 or 7, and they've become like family to me. I called the lady that owns the ranch, she and her husband. I talked to her yesterday and told her I'd be back in August this year.
Right.
Missed because of the pandemic.
Right.
Virtually every year. And I love it. You go out and you work on a ranch and help them do what they do, driving cattle from one pasture to another. And you get to be a real cowboy or a real cowgirl.
That's awesome.
And I'm inviting anybody to go with me. So they gave me, I was there 2 years ago on my 80th birthday.
Right.
And they gave me this vest as a gift. And it's got the Battle Creek Ranch logo on it. And I told her yesterday, I have worn this vest every day during the pandemic.
I would wear it right now if I had it. It's a little chilly out here. It's perfect.
It's great. And so they've gotten a lot of publicity out of this birthday gift that they gave me.
Perfect.
But they're wonderful people, and I look forward to seeing them all again.
And that's the Battle Creek Ranch in Montana.
It's about an hour or so north of Bozeman.
Okay.
It's the middle of nowhere. They've got 16,000 acres. Nearest house is about 5 miles away.
Well, I was supposed to go and fly in April into Missoula to do some fly fishing, and I'm going to put it off one more year.
Oh, are you? You should go. Don't put that off.
You know, I got a wife and kid, and I got to be careful of, you know, if I got anything, because I haven't gotten the shot yet.
All right.
All right. So, yeah, I'm not that old yet.
Yeah, I know you're not.
Before we go, the worst question I asked, but I think I already know the answer, and that's, you know, Gene, what do you want to be remembered for? What have you done that you want people to always remember?
Well, I'd like for people, if any one thing would be, I'd like to be remembered as a friend. I've tried my best to reach out to as many people as possible. I told somebody the other day, it's just important to reach out and maintain contacts. I had dinner last night, and I'm going to have dinner again tonight with a guy over in Advance area. We've been friends now since we were 7 years old, so that would be 75 years.
Okay.
We've been friends. And I've built a lot of other friendships along the way. Those are really important. I've got a couple hundred people I call each year and wish them a happy birthday. you're one of those people.
I know.
You
I was going to say, we have a little bit of an age difference, and I was, hung around more with your kids than you.
Yeah.
But I think I know that if I ever needed anything, you're one of the people I'd call. And I know that if I'm in Charlotte and I needed a place to stay, your door would be open because you're a great man.
And I'm making new friends every day because of the book. There are people who have written me emails and said, I've read your book, let me tell you this or that. I actually got 2 of these were very, very surprising. One was a guy whose father had worked at Reynolds. I knew his father, who he was, and he is a retired physician at Duke. And he wanted to know, he grew up in Winston-Salem, and he introduced himself by email, and I have since talked to him on the phone. And I told him, you didn't really need any introduction. You have no way of knowing this, but your mother was my first school teacher, and she left the mid-year to have you. And so I remembered that. And so I said, that was 1945. And I knew your mom before you knew your mom.
So what does they say? Winston-Salem's the smallest big city in the world.
Yeah. And then there was another lady. I got in contact with her. I didn't even know she existed, but she lives out in the middle of New York State. She married a guy she was from here. She married a guy who went to Wake. They went back north, and he and his father built the largest car auction house in the state of New York.
Wow.
I chatted with her, and it turned out that her family is from the country over in Yadkin County.
All right.
And she had no way of knowing this, but I said, I remember her father, Paul, said, you had an uncle named Roy, and he married my mother's sister. I said, your uncle married my aunt. We'd never met or heard of each other. She's invited me to come up and visit with them in New York, and I'll probably go up and see them this summer.
That's amazing.
So
that's amazing.
You make a lot of contacts, and I'd like to be known for having a lot of friendships.
Oh, and I think you've already succeeded in that.
As anything else.
What I will say is, and I don't know if you remember this, have you ever heard of Smitty's Notes? All right, so Smitty's Notes is something that started many years ago by Jeff Smith. And Jeff was at Womble Carlisle, I think was where he was working, and he wanted to get out to everybody what was happening. Or no, maybe he was working at over in Greensboro at one of the places over there. I don't remember where he worked, but he started this email list of where you could go to find out what's going on this weekend.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Well, he's a sponsor of our show, so I want to say thanks to Smitty's Notes and ask people to check them out and go to smittysnotes.com. But we're going to put links for your website, information on how to get the book, and you actually have done several different podcasts with the New Canaan Society and other things. We're going to put those in and tag you back to that stuff. But I just want to ask everybody to, if you like this, please like it, subscribe, click the alert button, and please make some comments and thank my friend, Gene Hoots, for spending some time with us today and letting us learn more about Winston-Salem and also R.J. Reynolds Tobacco. And he's a great investor. I know that much. You've made me some money, so I thank you for that.
Thank you for letting me come back home and talk with you. It brings back a lot of great memories. And Winston-Salem and this area will always be my home, no matter where I hang my hat.
Well, I appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah,
we'll be back next time with more
Thank
Camel
you.
City Chat. Thank you.